It truly does hurt to be right, but man, this movie is somehow even more of a disaster than I originally predicted. The Odyssey, in no short words, is a overly long, miserable, poorly acted, shoddy, and completely incompetent film that wastes 3 hours of your precious life by delivering a story that has already been told much better, before promptly deconstructing and tearing the source material to shreds. The Odyssey can be summed up as Christopher Nolan's ultimate middle finger to the original story written by Homer, as he proceeds to butcher it with some of the most baffling decisions possible I've ever seen in a movie. This movie might actually be in contention for the worst movie of the year because, on top of being poorly written and poorly acted and just generally shit, the movie is filled with so much pure hatred for the original source that it makes The Last Jedi look like a thoughtful fan film in comparison. This movie is such a fucking mess, and while normally I'd give a plot synopsis of this movie, there are so many goddamn problems with this movie, I'm just gonna have to hop into them one by one, so let's get started. The total problem in this movie is such a fucking issue that it completely takes you out of the movie and only amplifies further problems that I'll get into later. The tone of the Odyssey is nothing but bleak misery, that's it. All the charm and wonder of the original fantasy story written by Homer is completely gone. This entire movie is people crying and being miserable for 3 hours, and constantly complaining and sulking about their own problems, over and over and over again. No one ever actually solves their problems, they just keep stewing in them until the movie's over. Because Christopher Nolan for some reason decided instead of making a fantasy movie, he just wanted to make a dark serious drama that is completely incompatible with the actual story. Characters like Odysseus and Penelope just spend their entire time moping about their issues, and it completely ruins any investment I could have in the movie. The millionth fucking scene we see Odysseus talk about his problems, it makes me want to throw my remote at the TV screen. The Odysseus of the original story has warped from a heroic figure into this sad shell of a man that I had to spend 3 hours with, as he completely eats up the scenery with his bitching and moaning. Speaking of which, no one on the set of this movie gave a single shit about the fact that this movie is supposed to take place in ancient Greece. Ignoring the fact that no one in this movie even tries to look remotely Greek, this movie still has the immersion of a middle school play. Characters talk like they just walked out of a Chick-fil-A and constantly use modern slang for some reason, with probably the biggest offense being when they start saying mom and dad when they could just use mother and father and would probably solve that problem. But since Christopher Nolan doesn't give a single shit about the actual source material, everyone just talks like a modern metropolitan American. Which also happens to be where they bought most of their clothes, because holy shit, the costumes in this movie look like ass. Nothing actually looks like the setting or even matches the other shit on screen because Nolan decided to raid some dumpster of a fucking party city and find some generic Roman soldier outfits to just slap together. No one gave a single shit with this movie, and that is perfectly exemplified further with the actual characters themselves. The characters in the Odyssey aren't even actual characters. They're either crying miserable losers who bitch and moan about their problems endlessly, or the actor just says fuck it and just starts playing themselves, except they're wearing some cheap Halloween costume they found in their son's closet. Odysseus, like I mentioned earlier, has been turned into a miserable, sulking old man who is the complete opposite of his capable, heroic self in the original story. Instead, he just whines the whole movie and constantly stews in his past regrets, even manifesting a girl who was killed as a vision of Athena, because I guess we needed to root out some more fantasy elements to hear our main character cry some more. Despite the entire story of the Odyssey surrounding his desire to return home, Nolan decided to make him repeatedly say that actually he doesn't even want to return home, so he can cry some more to himself. And in fact, Christopher Nolan has turned Odysseus into TLJ Luke Skywalker, except instead of Mark Hamill, we get Matt Dolan, who cannot fucking act to save his life. Penelope is played by Anne Hathaway, who basically is just herself the whole movie, but Nolan also decides to mix it up with some bullshit into this fucking awful movie by turning Penelope, who used to be a fairly capable woman, into a hysterical bitch who has routine crying sessions that eat up screen time and probably your will to live. She's probably one of the worst actors in this movie, probably because she's the only one who's actually acting in the movie. Tom Holland's some fucking guy whose name I forgot, who also does nothing except talk about Odysseus, I guess, and just hangs out the entire movie. He's effectively just playing himself with an American accent and has a whole subplot that of course goes nowhere. Ellen Page is in the opening scene of this movie and is supposed to be Achilles, but for some reason isn't called Achilles because Nolan just wants to piss on the source material some more, I guess. And despite being built like a malnourished Smurf, Odysseus calls her character the bravest and most feared soldier who ever served him.
Are you retarded?
And for everyone else in this movie, they're terrible as well. And it just makes the whole movie feel like a film filled with people just talking with one another like this is some fucking water cooler everyone just chats at for some reason. Wait. Oh no, I fucking mentioned it. This movie has some of the worst fucking writing I have ever seen from a Christopher Nolan movie. I talked about The Dark Knight Rises having absolute dog shit writing in another video, but this movie takes the cake for being the most incoherent, meandering bullshit script I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing. This whole movie is literally just 3 hours of people sitting around and talking. Nothing is ever brought to a conclusion, it just keeps circling around and around until you want to put a fucking gun to your mouth after realizing you still have 2 hours of this shit left. Somehow this movie has a more repetitive story than The Room, which literally had 3 scenes that were borderline copies of each other. This movie somehow has 3 separate subplots, with what seems like 20 duplicated scenes featuring the exact same shit. I could summarize every scene in this movie in about 5 seconds. People sit down, they talk, someone cries, we cut to something else. Nolan just keeps repeating the same shit over and over and over again for no goddamn reason. He's trying to stretch out the story to a runtime that is absolutely not warranted in any regard, so he can fill it with repetitive speeches from people talking about shit that no one cares about for 5 years. This isn't helped by the fact that Nolan feels the need to explain everything that really doesn't need an explanation, like how they need to spend 20 minutes explaining the sack of Troy using the wooden horse, and have an extended backstory to show every single fucking step of this slow-ass plan. It's a fucking fantasy movie, I can suspend my disbelief as long as you get to the fucking point. The writing in the Odyssey is nothing but pure dog shit. A fucking disaster that somehow manages to be boring and infuriating at the same time. It just makes the movie be such a fucking drag to get through, and had me checking my watch multiple times throughout the movie and debating whether or not I should just fucking leave the theater. Ultimately, I stuck around just for this review, and I can perfectly say that this writing is fucking dog shit. I hate this movie. I hate it with every part of my being, because this movie is not just bad or boring or whatever. It actively decides to maul a beloved story that has been retold for thousands upon thousands of years and turn it into this boring, depressing mess that gets praised from the endless swaths of people willing to circle jerk over being quasi-intellectuals because Nolan makes them feel smarter. The Odyssey is an abomination through and through, but even though I tore this movie a new asshole, it is totally reasonable for people to like this movie. I am not a fan of most Christopher Nolan movies, and that probably didn't help my opinion on the Odyssey, but even so, the genuine criticism for this movie should not be ignored and brushed aside so people can blow smoke up Nolan's asshole and tell him that he's the next coming of Christ because he makes movies that pretend to be smart. This movie has flaws, and that is undeniable. Anyone who seeks to ignore them is just being a lapdog for a guy they've never met. With that said, the Odyssey is a piece of shit that deserves to be put down like Old Yeller. That's the video. Bye.